Angela, can you just make sure your microphone is muted, please? Democratic Services begin recording. Thank you very much. From da, croeso di cyfarfod, diolch am dod. Good afternoon, welcome to the Regeneration, Public Protection and Housing Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday, the 27th of June 2023. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcast via the authority's internet site. Images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the authority. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Thanks, Ryan.
Chair?
Yeah.
Councillor Michelle Simmons. I know he's part, but she's late, so I'm coming.
Leader. Others. So item agenda 2, declarations of interest.
Mentioned, Chair, I need to leave about 5:15.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, thank you. Anna and Clive also have a meeting at 6. So yeah, at Scott. So if it's goes on, they may have to leave. Okay. Item agenda 3, Scrutiny Forward Work Program. Any questions on that? The one in the report. Sorry for those. We have got a more up-to-date forward work program. I believe it was circulated. Yeah, Thursday last week.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it. We went through it yesterday. Got a couple of suggestions, Al, if see what you think. September's quite light. Just wondered if could maybe bring the St. Tidwell Shopping Centre report and a report on Cleveland site to September. Would that be okay? Great. And then the other one John brought up today. John, do you want to say?
It's just on the issue of the fly tipping. I'll just, because I know it's going to be jumping. Or Paul did say it might be going back to part of it, the neighbourhood.
Yeah, the actual picking at the moment, the two boys with a little white van, they came over to environmental health. So we're going to split that up because that needs to go back. Yeah. So myself and Judith are currently in discussions of whether it goes back to the street scene or is it appropriate for it to go to Davis and West.
It's just for the hot spots. So we got Casa Bianca behind the Wyndham, that area, and the tram road again. Like there's another 20 bags on the tram road again this week. Like it's getting ridiculous.
So it's all destroying.
It is.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Well, Chair, I thought that there was going to be a meeting between two committees, Neighbourhood Services and this one. Certainly, officers and chairs were going to talk to each other, see the the necessity, frankly, of having a joint meeting, but that was months ago. And I think councillors need to know exactly what the way ahead is, because, as Councillor Thomas has just explained, there are problems right through the county borough, and it needs to be crystal clear, apart from the public, but ourselves need to be crystal clear in dealing with this.
Yeah,
and it seems to be dragging its feet. That's all.
I wasn't actually aware of that. Happy for to meet with the two chairs.
Yeah, I think if we could have a separate meeting, off our forward work program, that would be really good.
Yeah. If I can just say, basically, straight says don't fly tip. Yeah, it's a hard core of the public, and at the moment there's more stuff being fly tipped. Yeah.
I think when we had our scrutiny, like one of the recommendations was the like you just said, flight tipping goes over back into the street cleansing, and then the enforcement stays where it is, because it does seem a bit disjointed. Like street cleansers will leave rubbish and just say that's not, if it's over what a litter picker would pick up, it's a bag of rubbish, that's not our responsibility. It just seems a bit disjointed a little.
And unfortunately, it just gets silly then.
Yeah, I've had it. I know we're going off topic of the forward work program a bit, but yeah, that has been an issue for me when I've challenged say a litter picker on, you know, ward, and he said, well, that's not my job. And I'm like, well, you know, just speak to people, you know, report it. So anyway, if that could be arranged, we can have a chat, that'd be great.
No problem.
And then in April, then, that would leave, town centre buildings, town centre master plan, and the Transforming Towns grant. Okay with me? The only other one we mentioned yesterday was, in January, is the housing. The increase, and the second homes, I know they haven't come in yet, but like, is there any backlash and anything on that? If an update could be brought on that, would be great. Brilliant. Anything else for the program? Okay, item agenda 4, the DFG. Yeah, Sue's or Karen? Yeah,
Start.
sorry.
Gonna be about this being something that urgently needed to have an expansive discussion about where we come from, process of delivering an award in DFGs, the changing the pressures, the value of discussion processes currently set up, and what perhaps can do to alleviate pressure and make the process more smoother. So roughly in that basket of steps, that's what we'll be exploring Saturday.
Yeah, so the report itself, and I included some background papers just to show some of the really stark statistics of the growth that we've seen over the past sort of couple of years, specifically more so post-pandemic. So I suppose the challenge of the operational growth in demand, but the impact on it's sitting in already a really pressurised service within housing and strategic housing specifically. So what I've tried to do within the report is do a really succinct just explanation of the pressures that the service is encountering at the moment, and really to split it out into two main categories really. So the first one being the demand change in the DFG and the projected demand change that we are seeing no let up to really. We thought it may be a bit of post-COVID effect of a slowdown of works, and then some catch-up work to do, but as we're seeing from the OT referrals and the background papers, I've tried to include the referrals are up significantly and there's no sort of slowdown in that either. So it's how we manage that increased demand, balanced against the fact that we've got an SLA with RCT and Care and Repair to deliver a requirement of £850,000 per year. So we have no in-house staff to deliver anything else. But we do have a significant proportion of applications now waiting and sat with both myself and Jen. So on top of the day jobs, we're having to administer another DFG function essentially with no additional resource. The report also talks about the other element of it. So it's not only managing the demand, the expectation, and taking that ownership across the authority. So this is you know, in part to do with our OTs and doing that initial assessment to understand what DFG work would be necessary and appropriate for somebody to live independently, but then moving through to the assessment of the property and the technical side of things, about what's reasonable and practical within somebody's property or an RSL property if it's not owned outright. The other side of things are the strategic fit now. As I mentioned, it sits sort of within strategic housing. So we have to make decisions on that, whether what's reasonable and practicable and what we take forward without that technical knowledge, which we are experiencing some bumps in the road with that already. So, you know, we can make the decisions, we can hold the budget, we can help with grant funding, we can see what adapted stock we need. Strategic housing, you know, I see there is a role going forward. But whether this is the best strategic fit to manage this most effectively, but also in the most efficient way from a corporate resource perspective and a customer experience and delivery perspective. Alongside that, I do mention in the report that there is a risk with our current SLA. So we currently have, as I mentioned, a service level agreement 2020 to 2025. So if current agreement ends on the 31st of March 2025. This is solely with RCT. RCT, without having the resource to deliver all of the functions, have a subsequent SLA with Care and Repair to deliver on our behalf. At the moment, Care and Repair are seeking some legal advice on 3 avenues. One, to end the SLA early because of the pressures on the service being more than what we asked them originally, but also them not being really equipped as an agency to take on the risk associated with the large grants. 2, to continue delivering our DFGs, but not to deliver the extensions, which we would have some concerns about, as the DFGs require all elements of that delivery. And the third is seeking some advice on whether or not to end early. So I think we need to be prepared, albeit they're reassuring that they wouldn't leave us in the lurch and they try and help us maintain service continuity. It is a risk to our service as a whole prior to that sort of March 2025 deadline. So that's sort of where we are. I just wanted to hand over to Jen just to talk about obviously what this means and what this looks like on a day-to-day basis for the strategic housing team to consider that strategic fit. And just to give a couple more of the stats that we've updated since the writing of the report really over the last couple of weeks, if that's okay.
Yes, I can with it, because yeah, so when I first started getting involved with DFGs, it was like a bit of a fractured relationship between all the partners and stuff, and it was a bit of they haven't done this and they haven't done that, and all, it was a bit of a mess. And then obviously then with the budget being met and constraints around that caused more pressure for everybody. So we had to look at adopting a new process really to A, save the partnership working and relationships between everybody involved, and B, to provide a better customer service as well to our clients that are being referred. Who often we're experiencing being passed from one service to another, just to get a bit of information. You guys yourselves have probably experienced that a little bit as well when trying to make inquiries for your constituents as well. So yeah, it has meant that we've had to pick up a little bit more of the administrative kind of tasks, letters, informal appointments, and a holding list of referrals, managing all that kind of stuff. We've been managing the operational as well as the strategic meetings. Working with the partners as well in terms of communications, better ways of addressing those larger referrals as well for extensions, getting them surveyed quicker and making decisions as quick as we can, because there have been people that have been waiting long lengths of time, especially for extensions and things, and not knowing what's going to happen, which ultimately caused then implications where there were complaints coming in for lengths of time that people are waiting, the unknown, not having the information in regards to other options that might be suitable to meet their needs, like moving property or anything like that. Like recently, I've been working on a case. They weren't informed that they could register for housing because the DFG had been turned down, and then we're waiting quite some time then for property, given the housing crisis that we're in. It does take time, so the sooner that somebody has that done, better really, and as soon as they've had that advice and got their supporting information and things from COTS, to support them more, that helps them then to put them in a better situation. But also just like new referrals now come to myself in the grant through the grants inbox or Sian. We now list those referrals because Care and Repair or RCT grants don't have the resource at the moment to be taking referrals all the time. We have a holding list of people. We manage that holding list, but as soon as they come onto that list, they get a letter updating them of estimated timescales, what's involved with the decision for DFG, so they are informed, and they are offered that opportunity as well. If they don't understand what's in the letter, they can ask for a call back, and I'll give them a call back then within 7 working days to discuss it with them, or whatever's advocated as well. So that has improved the customer experience for people, as much as they don't like to hear that there is a wait time and stuff at the moment that we can't overcome right now. They are thankful really for having that information and the honesty around it as well. But also as part of that, we're liaising with RCT and Merthyr Valley, whenever it's Merthyr Valley's property, particularly where there's large works that need to be surveyed. So we're liaising with COTS and everything to get those decisions made quicker, so they're not wasting time on the referral holding list if the works can't happen at their property. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so on a day-to-day, I'm responding to queries, MP queries, councillor queries, customer queries, not just about the referral for DFG, but if the DFG that they've had quite recently needs a repair. So working with Care and Repair around those cases as well. Yeah, and just making sure that the client's overall well-being as well as looked after. So I've recently had a conversation with a client where unfortunately DFG had to be declined. It wasn't considered reasonable and practicable to carry out those works. And I had to have a conversation regarding that gentleman's mental health because he was talking about harming himself. So those conversations are not quick conversations. You can't just go, okay, that's not my job, and put the foot down. You've got to speak to them, you've got to spend time with them, signpost them in the right direction, or even putting in referrals for additional support wherever possible as well. Yeah, and then it's just the other stuff then, the operational stuff behind the scenes, facilitating all the meetings between everybody, the communications and feedback from COTS back to us, back to Care and Repair, the RCT, then back to COTS, and so there's managing all of that stuff as well. Sorry, I've got quite a bit of a list. Yeah, so like again with the Worth Valley Homes properties as well, if it's more than 5k, those referrals get sent back into us. We then have to do all the management of that on the reporting list as well. And then again, if that needs to be escalated to make a decision quicker, if there's larger works, then we have to facilitate all of that as well. Yeah, the HCF applications and things we're doing for any additional funding to help with larger works. Merthyr Valley Homes have been great in terms of working with us around that stuff as well and obtaining funding to help take some of the other referrals that we've got on hold that are in their properties as well. So recently they've been awarded additional 100k and they are going through the HCF funding and they have taken 5 of our referrals. I know it's only 5, but it brings our list down again and that's somebody waiting less time again then. Yeah, I think I've covered everything, but there's probably lots that I haven't as well. It's just part of the role. But yeah, it takes me away from our housing crisis, our rapid rehousing function and everything that we're doing that way, because we're finding at the moment that DFG is consuming a lot of time. So I'm roughly given about 2 or 3 days a week of DFG alone. And that's without whatever Susie's doing on top as well. So yeah, it's definitely something that could be better managed, again, better than what we've got in place, but we are seeing better customer feedback, better responses, even though they're not happy, they're happy that they got somebody to contact. Phone call yesterday, for example, just somebody chasing up an update for their stair lift, didn't realise they were still on a holding list with us, also didn't know that they could look to discuss with Care and Repair, maybe getting those works done privately. They had the means to do it. So they were going to look at exploring that, but we're aware of that information. Even the case as well where people don't understand that if they don't get approved for DFG for larger works and they do need to move, how to go about using the house, like registering for housing and all that stuff as well. So it is useful for us to have those conversations, but we need the resource to be able to carry on doing what we're doing.
Thanks, Jen. I think that just explains on a day-to-day basis the operational management and delivery of DFGs. And I think, as Jen mentioned, we've currently got about 60 referrals on hold. So Care and Repair have projected that they would spend their full allocation of 850k for this year. And we've got another 60 referrals waiting on hold. We may be able to release some more as we have become far more clinical in terms of the assessment of what is reasonable and practicable from an owner-occupier perspective. We've got to be really prudent given the constraints on public finance, the level of investment going in, given the rising cost of materials to convert people's homes, really. So that assessment has become far more clinical over the last couple of years. So we are seeing some extensions being turned down. That will mean that far more people can get their small and medium works, but doesn't resolve all of the problems. So I think if we leave it there and open it up then just for support really from our fellow members and a bit of a discussion on how we can address some of these challenges and consider what the options are going forward.
Okay, thanks all. The questions, Clive?
Well, I might give you a little one here, but it's not on the report. It's on the business case. I don't quite know why the business case service changes wasn't attached to the main report. And when I read this from end to end last night, to say I was alarmed, Chair, is the understatement of the century. So I'll start off with my first question, which is related to page 3, business case towards the bottom. Refers to our council's entering an SLA with RCT to administer grants on our behalf, and they in turn got an SLA, I think, with care and repair to carry out some admin and technical work. The SLA states that RCT agrees and shall coordinate and manage the provision of Merthyrs DFGs on a day-to-day basis. Shall include one thing. What I want to know is, how with RCT, is it just us and them dealing with the DFG grants? Or are they looking after anybody else, any authorities? Is it just the two?
Just us.
Just us and them, right?
Yeah.
Because it says the first point here under that paragraph, employ sufficient persons to manage the DFGs in an effective manner. Now, I understand from reading everything that their number of referrals have also shot up. So I presume they had the same number of staff during COVID times, and now within a short space of time, guns are firing all over the place. My other question is, and it's over the page 4, interesting, top of the page there. And I sent earlier on this afternoon a query to Jennifer about the legal timeframes, because reading the Act, it's quite specific in there that we have to abide by a time frame. From what I can read, I'd be absolutely amazed if we are constantly keeping to that time frame. So there's that one, because I think that I don't know whether this applies to every grant. The figure is 6 months. So with everything that's got to be done, and there are so many people involved, how you're able to keep to that time frame is one of the wonders of the world to me. Now then, on page 4, a bit further down, it said that DFGs are the main source of help for disabled people in a great majority of households in Wales, owner occupiers or live in private renting accommodation. This is the main ways they get the help. Most common types of adaptations, such as stair lifts, ramps, downstairs toilet and washing facilities. Just above that though, it says there's a category: critical, substantial, moderate or low. Now, I couldn't see anywhere in the business case or the report any breakdown as to what was what. Only we got as critical breakdown to the low. And in my view, the committee needs to have that information. So presume that information is readily available. Could that be sent to us? You obviously haven't got it to hand this afternoon, but if it could be sent to us by email, I think we'd all be interested to see that.
That's specifically to the community occupational therapist teams. I don't know whether Angela can confirm, that I assume would be available from the OT team.
Angela, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks. The categorization relates to making the decision at the first point of contact.
What the sound, because I'm
Wait there 2 seconds, Angela, it's a bit quiet.
Oh,
It is.
sorry. Thanks.
Have a go again.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
Maybe you were in there a little bit.
Oh,
We
right.
can hear you, it's just a bit quiet, so.
Oh, okay, I'll shout a bit then. So the categorization of critical, substantial, moderate and low is the categorization based on the initial referral to the COTS, and that dictates then the response time for them to undertake the assessment. So what you tend to find is that isn't then continued through by the time it comes to the referral for the DFGs. It's that initial categorization for the assessment response time. Does that make sense?
Yes, and who exactly, you've got that information, have you, at the initial stage?
We've got that information at the initial stage, and we'd be able to provide the referrals and the number of people who fall into which categories. But we won't necessarily, we'd have to probably manually track then of those individuals who are currently in the whether they sat within critical, substantial, moderate or low at the time of the initial referral.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm guessing somebody who might be low initially might become high as well.
Yeah, but you might find, and if I can give some examples to illustrate the type of things we're talking about that would fall into different categories. So it's not just referrals for DFGs that come through to the community OTs. So an example that would be critical would be someone who is no longer able to stand. They've got carers going in there. They need an immediate response to look at the provision of equipment to enable carers to continue provide the support safely to the individual. So that would be then categorized as a critical response that the OT would go out and do the assessment immediately or within the next day or two. Then it may be an example of low, which quite a few of these actually translate into DFGs, is that someone is having difficulty getting into the bath because physically they've become more frail, and that wouldn't be something that would require an immediate response from an OT to undertake that assessment. So the initial referral may come in and say, well, someone's looking at support with bathing, and is there a potential for a level access shower? So that wouldn't be an urgent critical response from an OT point of view. I think those two illustrate, the extremes from something that would be quite low to something that would be more critical.
All I want is the numbers. Somebody's got them at some stage.
Yeah,
Whether
we've
they-
got the
whether they
numbers.
change on the way through. I for one need to know where we are with these categories, and I understand if somebody's gone into low. Anyway,
I honestly don't think it's relevant, Clyde.
well, I'll give you an example. I know someone who's now ladies in their mid-80s, living on her own, who broke a hip, and from start to finish, this took nearly 2.5 years. She didn't have a bath for goodness knows how long. Now, that might not be critical, classified as critical, but for somebody of that age who applied because it was impossible for her to get in the bath, to wait 2.5 years from start to finish, I think is, and my guess is, that's not an isolated case. But this does happen.
I think if, in terms of the ones that have gone through all the assessment, in terms of like where they are, would be interesting to know like how many you have at that point. Because they've gone through all that assessment, not like first assessed or whatever. Ones that are waiting to work, how many are, those are critical, how many, and what is the value of those as well would be interesting. Are some 20 over 36 grand, or is it 30 critical that are only going to cost 5 grand or whatever?
It's certainly an exercise that we can look to do in collaboration with the OTs. As I said, we don't get involved. This categorization is purely for an occupational therapist to understand how soon they need to assess somebody's needs. From a DFG perspective, everybody on our list is vulnerable and needs urgent works, and they work through as quickly as we possibly can based on budget and resource. And I think, without being unable to comment on specific cases, it will depend on, was that mid-pandemic when the builders were, there's lots of external influences that have impacted the last 2 to 3 years predominantly. But, we can certainly have a look at.
Is it similar to the like housing, like band 1, band 2, band 3? Is it No.
Not for DFG. So somebody would be assessed as needing a DFG, and then the sort of application process starts. But there's a pretty considerable initial inquiry stage. So, you know, assessing, does somebody own their home? Is it an RSL property? Would they give consent for those works to be done? Of those works, you know, have a look at the age and condition of the property. Is it feasible to do something within the existing footprint of the house to be prudent in the first instance? If not, what type of works would be required, and what does that mean in consideration with the age condition of the property, and is that you know, is it reasonable to be able to adapt that home? So they and there are, you know, far more small and medium adaptations. Lots of people need conversions. Wet rooms are one of the major things that we come across. But everybody on that list is vulnerable and would be placed on date order and would be sifted through as soon as possible.
So there's no, just to clarify, there's no bandings of
I think that's what we were getting at, yeah.
it's not, that only relates to the initial visit
Yeah,
that is undertaken by the courts, because once the DFG has been assessed and it goes on the list, there is no, it's
on the list.
off on date order.
it's okay. Somebody might come in for us, as councillors, who's critical, and then there's 20 people who are not so critical on that list, and unfortunately, they go away.
classified. It's not like, it's only the classification is for them to get the OT there to make the assessment.
Yeah, I totally, I think, you know, when we first started discussing it, we were on two different
I mean,
paths, like, so.
what you got to remember with this as well, but different professionals speaking different languages, so the language in the professional world of the courts would be difficult from the technical people who are actually doing the technical assessment to us as housing professionals. So it's very difficult to make those mistakes. It's not a mistake. To get the wrong sort of impression of what.
Surely we come down at some stage as to whether one person's needs are higher than somebody else. It can't all be the same. Am I wrong?
I think you were right in what you're saying, but I think the process is different.
We're not able to make that call. It's not kind of within our remit, our role, to say whether somebody should be a priority over 59 other people also on that list. So consider their own needs as being the highest priority above everybody else. It's a difficult one.
There would be occasions where there is sort of risk of being able to access a downstairs of a property or get out of a house safely. If there's risk to somebody's personal life, then a court can ask that be prioritised, and that can be done in exceptional circumstances. But it's very rarely done because we have an equally sort of vulnerable group or category of people requiring similar adaptations to make their home as safe as they possibly can. So what we try and do is, if there are people waiting for small or medium grants, for example, then we'll try and access other pots like the Enable grant. We'll speak to Care and Repair about other sources. So if somebody's going to be waiting a long time, if they have the means to do it themselves, we'll help them go down that private route and get the trusted sort of contractors through Care and Repair, or we have a look at other options that could mean that they can have things done sooner. Now, courts do have separate budgets. I don't want to step on Angela's toes, but I know there's safety at home and some other budgets that they would look to access for that type of thing. But again, it's outside of the DFGs we'll be discussing in a minute, so I couldn't go detail on that. But
I just ask one question on it. In terms of those that are in hospital and are waiting that work, would that have any say in it? Because obviously that's a burden on the NHS then. Would that be anything, you know, if they're waiting for their home to be adapted?
again, that's down to social services would have ultimate say on.
I'm sure, Camille.
Yeah, thanks. In terms of people being in hospital, if they needed an adaptation for them to be supported to go home, they would look at interim arrangements. So if someone required something like equipment such as a commode, rather than put a downstairs bathroom on, which wouldn't be realistic within time frames to support and be discharged from hospital, they would look at providing a commode, and that would be the hospital-based OT. But if it was something like grab rails, hospital-based OTs can also access, enable and work directly with Ken Repair to facilitate the provision of grab rails in the property to support discharge. As far as I'm aware at the moment, I don't believe there's anyone waiting in hospital, waiting the completion of a DFG. And that was based on a couple of days ago, they did the census and there was no one waiting for completion of housing adaptations to support discharge.
I wants to ask.
Well, I just wanted to answer the question. There is no one in Prince Charles or Mountain Ash Hospital in our area as dependent on being discharged.
No, currently, and
Elderly people
on
in hospital who can't be discharged for a lot of reasons.
there's people in hospital at the moment and they collect on a monthly basis all the data for the reasons people are currently in hospital. They can move on to the next stage of care. And in Merthyr, for the last 3 months, we haven't seen anyone whose reason that they couldn't be discharged home was waiting an adaptation of a property.
Interesting. I'm still on this page 4, a bit lower down. It says in 2019, in Wales, 22% of the population were disabled. That starts Wales 2019. So that information is 4 years old. You've had the census figures come out since after March 21. But don't we have more up-to-date information than 2019?
Just trying to track where we were. We can access more information. We just referenced the latest data set that we use for our latest renewals policy. So when we update the renewals policy, every 2 years, so it'll be coming up at the end of this year, we'll update it again. Again, it's just down to resource in terms of how quickly we can update the information.
But there must be census figures, for example,
We would,
which is 2 years ago. That must be readily available at the press of a button.
have a look at that and we would be doing that as part of our policy change and checks when we update our renewals policy. Yeah.
Okay, bottom of the page, it says there's been increases in the number of older people in the living area. And it goes on to say the majority of people that the team work with are adults. However, the team also provides assessment support for children with disabilities. How many of those are there? Are they a very minute number? And would children be dealt with any differently to an adult, or will they seem to be saying that the needs are exactly the same, everybody, once they're on a waiting list?
We're not saying the needs are the same. We're saying there's no prioritisation of the, I suppose, speeding up of the grants, and a lot of this comes down to budget and resources, which is what we're here to discuss this evening. I think in terms of the numbers, we're certainly happy to break down any data sets that we can possibly and provide a split between adults. The majority of DFGs that we do are for adults and older people with mobility issues. But we do work with a number of families who have children with disabilities, and they would be assessed and processed in the same way. There are slight differentiations around things like, for example, means testing won't apply to children, so there are slight variations.
Right, a couple more and then
I'm trying to do my best. Page 6.
You come back.
Page 6, or you want to call it?
No, you want to start my question.
Right. On page 6, it refers there, with the fact that we spent 1.7 million in 22-23. That's right, isn't it? So what's the score in the current financial year? We've only got 850,000 quid. That's been eaten into by inflation, and the cost of materials have shot through the roof. So are we doing so far, say, at the end of June?
There's been spend of 248k up to as of the last fortnight. I think we had a meeting with Care and Repair on our quarterly sort of updates. There's been spend of 248k, and they projected to spend the full 850k plus an additional £100,000 we've just been awarded through the Housing with Care Fund. That is specifically only awarded for those extensions whose cost would exceed 36k and people don't have the means to pay. So we can use that 100k specifically for that purpose only. We did apply for around 250,000, but I think there was a significant a rise in applications based on the available budget really. So we were awarded 100k. So we will be projected to spend 850k plus the 100k this year. Plus we're being supported by Merthyr Valley Homes with some additional housing with care grant that they've been awarded.
Was that from a care fund, a particular care fund that because I think the figure mentioned the report 110,000 in the business case, and you would due to hear imminently according to this report another 240,000.
Yeah, we initially applied I think for about 110, and then 110 was last year. So we were awarded £110,000 from Housing with Care last year, and we had rollover from the year before, which totaled the spend of 1.7 million for last year. It actually went up to over 1.8, I think, by the end of the year, with Merthyr Valley Homes' contribution. For this year, we applied for 247, and we got awarded £100,000 this year.
Right. Now we come to the $64,000 question. If it seems that Care and Repair, because my memory of Care and Repair is that they didn't do this sort of work. I know when they were in Merthyr Tydfil, they moved over. They'd have small jobs in people's gardens, or the door was sticking. Now they're into the big arena, which I'd guess they are struggling with. So that's why they want to come out of it early. If they come out of it in the next 2 weeks, what will we do then?
There is no service continuity should that happen. However, they have reassured us, and we have been having regular meetings with Neris, the CEO, who is regularly liaising with the board, and they have committed that they fully on track and planning to take us up until the end of March next year. We've got large jobs and small and medium they've got in the system now. You're quite right in what you say. Care and Repair have been fantastic in terms of helping us reduce the backlog, as have RCT. And I think the whole decision around the outsourcing was right at that time. However, the demand now exceeding the available pot for that SLA means there's no resilience. So I suppose that leads me on to, again, what we're here to discuss today about future potential options. So they have struggled, more so from a financial risk perspective. So where the grants are over 36k, if a client says they're able to pay, but then they don't, the agency don't have the finances to carry the risk, and they're not averse in dealing with the larger works. You're quite right. So they are nervous around that, and they have asked, could they continue to deliver the DFGs without the extensions as an option? So they're seeking advice. However, both ourselves and RCT don't feel that is a viable option, because for us, the mandatory DFG includes the extension.
And here we come to the real hub of the matter, because it's been referred to, page 6 of the page 7. The DFG process has 21 steps. Let's say 20, because it comes out to 21 when the DFG granted. So there's 20 steps with a variety of people involved. This, to me, doesn't seem to be the most efficient way of running these grants in 2023. So, got to change. So, have the senior management team and the cabinet discuss this situation? And if they have they come to any conclusions? Or are they nearing to come to any conclusions? Because whatever happens, in my view, this is not the way to run things. As obviously, it's step by step, people in different departments, 2 SLAs is fraught with dangers.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is why, obviously, we asked for this to come to scrutiny, because we're on that journey, looking to see how we can improve, streamline, change the service. And this is part of the starting point. Myself and Susie and Jen, we're under the, we believe that we need to try to put a new process, a new system, and new arrangements in place by April 24. So this is the journey that we're on now, Clive, to assess the options, and to obviously discuss with portfolio, with cabinet, and with council. But you know, it's got to start here, isn't it? This scrutiny.
Can I just ask a question? If we did bring this back in-house from RCT and care and repair, the cost be cost neutral, and obviously ask a question, would you think it would provide a better service if you did?
Probably would, but it certainly wouldn't be cost neutral, because the reason we went, two reasons really why we got the current arrangement. We just didn't have the capacity, and I won't choose why we didn't have the capacity. It was also a favoured option by the insurance board. Time we're really keen on us exploring greater collaboration, service collaborations with RCT. So a lot of things happened at the same time. As Susie said at the time, it was right, and it helped us to clear a massive backlog of DFGs. COVID on the way, we have cleared quite a bit, but now the world has changed, and whereas RCT had oodles of capacity when we entered this, they're in the same boat now. You know, their DFGs have gone the same way as I was, so their capacity stretched. So I would have thought the best thing they'd want to do with us is get short of us.
Yeah. If say it did come back, how many would be employed? Would you?
Well, it's more complex than that. We would have to employ. I mean, Chris Jones there, from a technical perspective, Chris hasn't got any capacity in his technical team, so we need a technical capability. Where you can't rush into something like this because there's so many parts. It's how you best put it together and where it all sits. Which isn't an easy question.
Yeah, as Alan said, really, this is the first airing. It'd be great to get some feedback from you guys today, really, and some ideas may drop out of the conversations we're having. Prior to the move to RCT, we had two officers in that department, Ron and Glyn. Question I've got, Al, is if we were to bring this back in-house, obviously those posts were made redundant in our area now. How could that come back into the structure?
Slightly different posts.
Of different areas, well.
Because you know, the technical capacity we had, because Sean's been heavily involved with the, we had two old grant officers because that's where they were, but they sort of migrated into DFGs. Now, if you remember the renewal area, we had which was a funded program which we started in Merthyr Vale, we went up to Dowlais, etc. There were an awful lot of technical staff in that renewal area, set up for a few years under Julian Pike, and those grant funded staff, Julian was able to use their capacity as well to sort of help out across the department, but all that's gone now. So there's all we left with the technical capacity is obviously what we've got in Chris's area and in building control.
You know, in terms of say technical capacity there, are you expected to have any technical knowledge? You know, but do you get asked technical questions as well?
Yeah, so right now we're heavily reliant on RCT going over and above the SLA, and they are doing. You know, Anthony and RCT has been really helpful in terms of where we've exceeded the £850,000, for example, and we've got people waiting for extensions. We don't want them waiting for 6, 9, 12 months, then be told your property isn't feasible for an extension. So RCT are helping us and doing joint visits with the OT. So we're facilitating those. Again, just sort of acting as the middle person, just coordinating and facilitating that. So there is that joint assessment, so people aren't waiting a long time to be told that something's not going to happen, for example. But you know, that is an operational difficulty when you're making decisions in terms of and you know, dealing with ombudsman challenges, for example, if we have turned something down, it's very difficult for me to explain what that tying something into another property or how much work is involved means, because I'm not technically minded. So we do rely heavily on our partners for that.
Maybe Angela for this one, but in terms of like technical knowledge from the OTs, how much technical knowledge do they have? That is time wasted by them coming out and saying, oh, you need this, then the property's not suitable.
They can advise on pieces of equipment and advise that, you know, sort of potential for a level access shower. But in terms of the technical information around the build, where it should be placed, so part of the technical sort of whether it's reasonable and practical, they will look at the property and saying, well, look, you know, could the sewage in the right position? Are we able to do this from building controls and building regs perspective? And the COTS wouldn't have that level of technical detail.
Well,
Yeah.
it's in the report somewhere, a suggestion, which I thought was a great first step, is that when they make the first initial assessment, the COT should have a technical officer with them, and that's going to save issues and time way down the line. So for me, apart from putting it under whichever department, that is something that should happen at the start.
That's what we have introduced. So very
So sorry, is that happening as we start now? So how long has that been taking place?
Since we've kind of put in place the new process over the last couple of months, is kind of.
So we're talking about this year then?
Yeah.
Earlier this year. Well, that's great. I mean, that seems to me, having read this stuff, that was an obvious thing. So that should streamline it and cut down the time right from the start. I'll shut up after this and make the other questions there. But it's going to take 9 months before this happens and it's streamlined and it's put, because frankly, it's under the wrong department, in my view, without a shadow of doubt. What I've read here. It says in the business case, currently there are 79 referrals on hold as far as April 23 is concerned. So we are going to have, by the sound of it, a lot of cases. You seem to me to be, even with that extra 100,000, going to run out of money pretty soon. And then you'll have 80 frustrated people and relatives wondering what's happening. So I think we need to bear that in mind, that there is an effect on people out there. And one last point, because it was raised in the meeting yesterday, and I wouldn't sleep on put this point, but the figures are in here. If you're having 20 referrals a week, that's what, 700 odd?
15 to 20 is between 750 and over 1,000.
That's the referrals into the OT for assessment. That's not necessarily DFG referrals. So at the moment, on average, I've done it today.
I think the point we're making is how do you assess all of those? You know, that equates to like 3 a day if you work a 7-day week. Yeah, it's just not. It's not manageable, is it?
That's what's coming through the OT team of OTs at the moment, that they are spreading out.
Is it quite a? You know how many? Angela, how many?
I've been to the team meeting.
The number of referrals vary and they can be between 20 and 30 a week. Some of those would be for the provision of equipment, some would be provision of, you know, sort of minor aids and adaptations. Those 20 and 30 are into the team, and there is a team of 3 qualified OTs and 2 COT techs sit within that team. So they are doing a significant number of referrals on a weekly basis. Not all of those progress to a DFG, and only a small proportion would. So this isn't, not all of those referrals relate to DFG referrals.
I think our concern is that how do you get around them to assess them with that level, really?
I think there was a concern. We took it to social services scrutiny.
I don't know what.
Sorry, I knew that would happen.
Oh, we got it.
The social services scrutiny, because we did have a considerable waiting list for cost assessments, that's been brought down, and I'm able to provide the details of how many are currently being assessed. But that's the average numbers that are coming through, and it's been consistent for some time.
I mean, this isn't unique to just DFGs. If you look at the front door, just look at housing and homelessness, we just cannot keep up with demand, and obviously the money that we've got is losing value by the month. There's inflation and there's no other money in the system. When you get a spike in the system, that's when you can see the of a small authority like Merthyr, because we flat, the capacity is flat. So once you get that spike, you can say, where we are.
Is the 850,000 going to be looked at? Because clearly that figure's been there for X number of years. Inflation's gone through the roof.
We just gone through an exercise. Like, there's some capital program. Obviously, the interest we paid, the capital that we bought when that's gone through the roof, and you know we're still facing the fact next year we'll have to find a gap in the budget.
That the local authorities have actually cut, so RCT cut their budget from 4 million down about 30% last year to as part of their settlement. So some authorities are cutting as well as we've sustained, but I was quite pleased to hear that they weren't taking any money away, given some of the other positions that the local authorities have done. But again, it's not enough money, but it's across the whole system in terms of there's not enough money for anything capital related at the moment.
This is a mandatory service with a legal framework of work being done by us in time.
Yeah, not exactly the same as homelessness, so we can't keep up with that.
I think Knowles has some relatives living in there, so I'm sure he must come in. Okay, I'm gonna call somebody else.
Yes, thank you. So just to pick up on Clyde's point actually about where the GF function sits, can you elaborate on the history of why you came to sit within the strategic housing team?
It was historic because grants always sat with housing, technical team around grants. Remember the old grant system was in that pool of technicality. You're probably going back to the late 80s, and the organisation changed shape, and bits of the organisation spun into various places. DFGs was one of them. It was a housing function, and it was a housing function when we had a housing stock. But as we lost things, as we made cuts, what you've got now, DFG sitting in housing, because we've reorganised housing, which used to be quite a large department. Obviously, when we had stock, we had a technical team. When we reorganised housing and split into the strategic and the operational function, that's why it had to then go to Susie and the strategic housing function. So no one else to put it.
And can I ask, in your view, is it currently in the Merthyr context achieving its overall objective of allowing people to live longer in their homes?
It is, yeah, but only a certain proportion of people, because we haven't got the resources to meet the demand. For those who it helps.
Yeah, and despite the challenges, we have remained within the legal timeframes to date, but it will become increasingly challenging if the growth continues at the rate it is now. And if part of the consideration around this issue is potentially as per the business case that it may no longer sit within the housing team, is it the case that most likely any other team is going to face the same challenges, in that the pressures on them are also high? Absolutely.
We're older the baby, but whether if we passed that baby to someone else, they'd be in exactly the same boat. They wouldn't have the resources. They're younger.
If okay, just one more, just to pick up on the point about the waiting lists and how they're on date order rather than need.
Is this echoed across other local authorities in Wales, or have other local authorities been able to capture that need and take it through the disabled facility grant waiting time?
It is mirrored in terms of when an applicant is assessed as having the need and they go through the full application process. It will tend to be staggered, and they'd be seen within a period of 6 months for an approval and then up to 12 months for works to be completed. And that tends to run for everybody as and when the applications come in. Now we're operating holding lists, as I mentioned earlier. If there was a case, an exceptional case where OT says, for example, somebody couldn't leave their house without these adaptations, we could look at exceptional circumstances. However, looking at the vulnerability across the piece, they're all quite similar, and that is mirrored within RCT and Regeneration and our wider sort of South Wales partners.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Jack?
Thank you, Chair. Just one question is, I think I brought it up in a meeting recently, and funnily enough, for coincidence, I've only had a few of these requests, but I've had one today as well. There was a request from someone, a tenant in a registered social landlord, inquiring about the removal of a wet room adapted shower, so that they ask if they could install a bath because they've got a young family. I'm just wondering, because of the timeline it takes to put in something in regards to DFG, and also the cost, is this something that we can look at? Obviously, it probably doesn't happen all the time, but is this something that we could look at when you're matching people up to a property that listen, there's a wet room in here not really suitable for a younger family?
Yeah, I think the implementation of the Rent in Homes Act will give the RSLs, or community landlords as they're now known, more rights in terms of, say, for example, somebody sadly passes away, or the tenancy changes for whatever reason within a property, that the property is advertised as an adapted property. So there has to be somebody living in that property with that need. There would be consideration, you know, in terms of helping somebody transition into another property, but to lose that sort of churn of properties that has happened historically, I've got to say, I think it shouldn't have happened in any recent examples, because the RSLs know how, or community landlords know how pressured we are in terms of finding stock, and particularly being wet rooms the issue. So yes is the answer. So we can control it in terms of when we award DFGs from Merthyr Valley Homes properties. The other RSLs receive physical adaptation grants through Welsh Government, and again through our strategic housing partnership. We echo that the pressures are on, and that we would consider that once a tenant leaves with that adaptation need, the remainder of the family would need to be rehoused, and then somebody else with those needs. So it is something we stipulate with DFGs, but we urge the other RSLs.
You see it's coming into law?
It's tied in under the Rent in Homes Act now. So the legislation that came in December, it is effective as of now.
Oh, it is effective.
Yeah, so if someone passed away and that adaptation's not required, the RSL and ourselves will try and work with somebody to promote them to move, rather than force them into anything, work with them more positively. The allocations policy as well, as long as the RSL confirm there are adaptations, etc. in the property, and there's a need for them to move, they go into fund anyway to free up that property for somebody who's on the list.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Scott, do you want to say something?
No, I don't mind. Catch up with you after the meeting.
Yeah, item 5.1, I mentioned the increase in the demand for DFGs. I was wondering if an analysis had been undertaken as for the reasons that we've discussed: COVID, sort of cost of living, resources, funding. So only wondering about sort of percentages of why there's been an increase.
We haven't done any sort of deep dive analysis, again down to resource, because we're managing the day-to-day on top of the day job. But I think you know, we saw a rise significantly post-COVID, so we knew there'd be a catch-up period. And once a lot of the people who would have been shielding during that time gained their confidence back and allowed people into their homes, that we'd be playing catch-up for a little while. The price rising taking up some of the cost is another one. I suppose the aging population that we've got has a significant impact, and we can see the majority of people are coming through needing, you know, those grab rails, those wet rooms, because the mobility is starting to fail. I forgot the other one. I just had it in my mind.
I'm just gonna say to help you really, you know, Greenfield School is full to busting at the moment, right?